So you're welcome, unlike most events where they tell you to turn off your phone, you're welcome to turn it on, and Twitter. And I think we'll do #CENCOM, CENCOM, if you're interested in twittering about what you're hearing tonight. And we're going to go in later and read them all. I was once at an event, and I was in the audience, and they had the twittering, and I didn't realize that the panel up in front had a screen where they were showing all the twitters from the audience. And so I twittered that the moderator could possibly be the worst moderator in the history of moderating, not knowing that he was then looking at that. And of course my name is right there. And the rest of the panelists saw it and started chuckling, and it changed the whole nature of the panel, and the guy has never spoken to me since. But there is a power to social media.
I've seen that also where they've actually, when that happened, they shut down the screen, which I thought was a real problem. You should let it flow at least. Also, since the nature of what we're talking about is media and the convergence of technology and media, I was curious of those who watch TV still on a regular basis, do you participate with TV at the same time as being on a social network concurrently? So are you watching TV and talking on Twitter or any of these social networks simultaneously with your friend groups? Smaller amount of people.
How many of you watch TV online, on Hulu or ABC.com? How many of you still watch TV on TV? Anyone who doesn't watch TV on TV anymore? I wonder what that'll look like in about 5 years. Be interesting. Those are the challenges that the media companies, I work heavily with a lot of the traditional media companies and the traditional media brands, and one of the core challenges to them is they really don't have a grasp on what's happening to the traditional business models and how do they make that transition. They're so locked in to the models that have been in place for 50 years that they're struggling to figure out not just how do you move into the new, to take advantage of the viewing on Hulu and ABC.com or NBC.com or Bravo, wherever, or the sites like TV.com and Blip TV and AOL that are non-TV related. You were telling me earlier that of the top 10?
Well, I was saying the majority of the top 10 sites online for television were not networks except for the Weather Channel, which was actually the #1 destination for TV, which I thought it was interesting at the time. And we were also discussing, which I think is really telling, is how, whether it's the network itself or the shows, that it's not just on air that people are affinity to that. So if you're, probably have the worst case example, but if you watch Gossip Girl every Monday night, a lot of people don't watch it concurrently with the show, or they watch it in other places. So it's harder for networks and specifically the shows themselves to show their value offline or across the edges, as I like to say. So if people are watching it, DVRing it, so 3 or 4 days later, how does that factor into dealing with the ratings and the advertisers?
And how many of you DVR programs or time shift?
Wow. Anybody in the room, peer-to-peer users? We're obviously going to be an interactive panel here.
You're under arrest, sir?
No. But that in lies the challenge of how do you show the value of the brand off air or off the traditional space, because people are interacting in different ways. The other thing that I've seen emerge that's really interesting is how, and I've heard someone use the term transmedia on this, but how do people interact with that show in many different ways? And I think Mad Men's a great example of that, where you not only have the show that airs on Sunday night, but you also have people, each of the characters on the show participating in social media. So each one of the Peggy Olson Twitters each day and so on and so forth. They've built iPhone apps so the people are interacting with the show that way. So you see all these different touch points to the consumer that are not just focused on traditional air or broadcast or terrestrial television.
The fascinating challenge, we're here to talk about the future of digital, and the fascinating challenge is that all of these applications, all of these opportunities are emerging, and I think we'll talk about social networking and community building first, but that the media companies that are bringing you the vast majority of the entertainment and information that you consume every day really don't have a vision for where the revenues are going to come from to support the investments that they make. And so while Mad Men may have numerous applications, they really haven't figured out how to monetize that. How many of you are looking forward to the premiere of the last season of Lost? Lost fans? Surprised there aren't more of you. There are 50 websites that are forward-looking for Lost fans that are talking about what's going to happen next season, what to be looking for, what to prepare for. Only one of them is a site owned by ABC, and of the 50, it's probably somewhere in the 40s in terms of the audience that they generate. There is virtually no revenue model around those 50 websites. One of them's on tvguide.com, another on tv.com, one of them's in Yahoo, and they're managing to integrate them into their ad sales. But there's virtually no business model that supports that kind of content out there at this point.
And, you know, it's a disruptive time for media companies. So before I started my agency, I worked at a record label. I started when it was cool to work in music, and then it kind of turned like working for Microsoft at a certain point when they became the evil empire. And that's obviously when I exited stage left. But I had the rare, fortunate view of watching disintermediation take place from the inside and actually play out on the front page of most newspapers as you watched your business disappear. And that music was easiest because it was easiest to consume. So downloading a song was pretty quickly. Downloading an album now takes seconds. You know, in the beginning, it took a very long time. Now television, same thing. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot easier to consume it in new ways. And you talked about the challenges of media companies dealing with that. And there was a legendary quote, which I really like, which is, you can't replace analog dollars with digital pennies, right? And what I'm starting to see take place, and that was a quote from Jeff Zucker from NBC, which was really astute because that is happening and it is being disintermediated, but at the same time, it doesn't happen overnight. Music, when you go from a physical replacement like in music to digital replacement, it's not just refitting racks in a store to go from LPs to CDs. It's a much longer conversion. And I remember the heretics at the time, because I was at the label, saying that your industry's over, it's happening overnight, but it took 15 years to reach that legendary tipping point of where digital sales of music was overtaking the physical sales of music. So these transitions of disintermediation and disruption take a minute. And what I've started to see, specifically in television, is because of the emergence of social networks and I think it'd be, actually, I'm going to pause right here and kind of frame the decades of technology really quickly, but the first 10 years was just about going online and publishing. You were able to publish stuff on the web, you were able to put up stores. The next 10 years is the participatory phase of the web, which you're all doing right now. Most of you are digital natives, you grew up with social networks, so you're participatory, you're playing around with different things. And as the participatory web is leading into what we'll probably talk about later, the live web, or the real-time web, this is now affecting the first screen. So going back to the digital pennies to analog dollars scenario, there's a real opportunity, and this is the marketer speaking here, to use those networks to drive from one screen to the other. So because people are actively talking about what's taking place on television, and this is why I brought up how many people are concurrently playing on a social network while watching TV, your friends are talking about something happening, and the example I'm using most recently is Kanye saying, I'm gonna let you finish, right? And while he's saying that, everybody is writing into their Facebook statuses and Twitter statuses that, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that, and poor Beyonce, and this and that. But everybody's seeing that and is being driven to the first screen and going to watch it on TV because of just common interest. So as this period of disruption takes place,
it's actually a great example because he drew so much attention to that event, to the performers, and it's very comparable to David Letterman and what's going on with David Letterman, that the amount of Twittering, the amount of Facebook updates, the amount of online buzz about David Letterman is actually boosting his ratings dramatically.
I actually looked, I don't have access to Nielsen data, but I visualized data as a business, and Obama was a guest, President Obama was a guest on the show 2 weeks prior to this, and the bump on chatter was nice, but when this chatter is like 6 times the order of magnitude of attention on that show, and probably reflected in the ratings as well.
And it'll be a sustained ratings bump that he'll generate because people are always looking for that next comment or anticipating it. Your experience in the music industry, I think, is also particularly relevant because if we look toward what the future holds for the digital community across television and a lot of the magazines and a lot of the traditional media, I think it's very valuable to look at 2 industries, one being music and the other being sports. And music is particularly interesting because you can certainly look back, and Mark was at Sony, so he's better qualified to talk about this than I am, but certainly you all are aware of what happened with file sharing and Napster and the whole transition of music because of digital access and free access to music. But what's happening now is that the music industry is finding new business models built around live performance and using digital and free distribution to build a new industry built around Live Nation, concerts, merchandising, licensing, and we're seeing a real resurgence of live performances. And I think when we look into the future for what will happen with our traditional television brands, as well as some radio brands and magazine brands, we're going to see them develop new business lines around connecting personally with their communities and using social networking, user-generated content online, and future social networking to bring together communities in live, real person connections, whether they happen online, but I think also happening around events and happening around taking the brand out to the people and giving them personal experiences. So I think the opportunity for television is to look at digital and to use it as a way in the same way that the music industry is using it.